I'm going to attempt to show you how teapots are made. It's actually been 4 years at least, possibly 5 since I've made teapots. But there you go. I'm going to give it a go. First off, I'm going to make the base for you. This is a little bit bigger than I usually go. It's a 3 1/4 pounds. So I have somebody that would like a slightly larger teapot. And seeing as I haven't made them in years, I figured I may as well oblige him. So because of the style of lid that I'm going to make, I like to leave the clay a little bit on the thicker side at the top, because I'm going to make a lower down flange for the lid to sit in, which really is a bit more challenging. So most of you, as you're going to make your first teapots, you might want to do a slightly different design for the lid well, like a little curve or something. You could just like make a little dent in there for the lid to sit in. Or even like a little raised edge like that would work for the lid to sit in. Because the way I'm going to show you is, I got to admit, a little bit challenging. But first, let's tidy up the shape. So now we've got the basic base made, we need to turn our attention to where the lid's going to sit. And this is a little bit tricky. Part of the problem I've always had in the past with my form is this shoulder here, because of course when you're making the flange for the lid, you end up kind of knocking the shoulder down, so you have to go back in a few times to deal with that. I've got my finger underneath to help support the collar. And I'm just pressing down with my finger right now and making the little dent for where the lid is going to go. If you make it a nice little V shape like this, when you're making your lid, if you've got a little bit of wiggle room, if your lid ends up a little bit too small. In that, with this angle, the lid can sit there or it can sit closer to the top. Now I'm going to go back and lift up my shoulder. And really, to me, this has always been the finickiest part of this step in the teapots. You see, I got a little bit of a dent there. So now you can see, while I was dealing with the dent that I made there, that this lifted up. So it's a little bit of a back and forth at this point. So I'm going to just sink that down again. Now I'm going to look, and hopefully I didn't sink that too much, just a little bit, but not bad. So I'm hopefully this will be my last one. Just lifting that shoulder up again. Let's see. Oh, that's not bad. You know, I could do more here tidying this up, but the clay is pretty soft and I don't want to mess it up. And so now we've got the area for our lid to sit in. We've got enough depth for it, and we can trim that later on and make that tidier if we want to. So that's your basic base for your teapot. So I forgot to measure when this was on the wheel, but hey, there we go. Let's measure for the lid. So I've always thought that it's best to err on the side of a lid that's slightly too big, because you can always pare it down whereas you can't add clay to it to make it bigger. So I'm throwing my lid upside down because I'm going to be trimming it afterwards and putting a knob on it. Now let's see if I guessed well with the amount of clay. Oh, way too much. Okay, so no big deal. I'm going to flatten it down. This is the part that's actually going to sit in the rim of the pot. And then this is going to sink down into the pot. And you want this to be fairly tall so that when somebody's pouring their tea, if they forget to put one hand or a finger on the lid at the same time, that hopefully their lid doesn't fall out. So make that fairly deep. Now, that's looking miles too big. Let's see. Yes, indeed. Okay, so I'm going to just pare a little bit of that off. Okay, well, we're still a little bit big, but like I said, better to be a little bit too big than too small. So I'm just going to make sure that there's enough room for the flange and that that's not too wide. Make that nice and straight. It's all ready for you tomorrow, or me rather. That's too big. I can trim it down a bit when I go to add my knob. Part number 2. Did I mention teapots are a labor of love? So many parts, and they all have to go together and flow nicely. This is why I haven't done them in 4 or 5 years. Maybe this is the last time I'm doing them. Okay, now the spout. So I throw the spout at the same time as I throw the teapot. I keep an eye on it as it's setting up to the leather hard stage because you don't want the tip of the spout to get too dry because you want to be able to cut the pour line. I always make it the same day as making the teapot so that they have roughly the same shrinkage rate. So I'm going to pull it across there so we have a nice wide bottom for the spout. And then I'm pulling it back. And now I'm going to choke it in. Now at this point I'm going to cut the rim because I want it to be nice and sharp. Okay. So now I'm going to shape this part and take this side of my rib, just pressing down, making a nice smooth spout line. Tidy up that spout again. Okay. And that's it. Our spout is done. Let me see. Yeah, I can be happy with that. Those are the parts. Now, these would sit overnight. You want to dry them carefully because you want them relatively the same consistency tomorrow when you go to trim the bottom of the teapot. But in the meantime, you know, the day before I was throwing a couple, so I'm going to go get those and show you the next steps. Now I'm going to show you how to trim the lid. So there's the lid as we threw it upside down. Now, as you can see at this part, it's pretty easy if this is too big to trim it down to scale. Now we're gonna score for where we're gonna put the knob. Now put a little bit of magic water, or vinegar, any of the above. Now for our knob. Okay. Make sure you join this well at this point. Now, it's always kind of wild. You look at that ugly thing. That's going to become a knob? Yes, it is. It's magic. So I'm kind of pressing down at the top, but I've also, you can see how I have my fingers positioned. I'm already shaping the knob. It's just basically forcing the clay into the shape that I want. And then I'm going back down here to make sure I've got a really good join. Okay, so now I'm making my little trademark pointy little hat lid. There you go. Easy peasy, as I say. We've got the lid made. We have our spout from yesterday. I have a teapot all ready to roll. But first, I need to pull the handle that's going to go on that. The handle will be setting up and shrinking a bit as I'm putting the spout on the teapot. By the time I've got the spout done, the handle should be just the perfect consistency. Now, I could pull the handle off the teapot, but then I think you'd all be cursing me because that's really hard. So let's just start with a nice long pulled handle that we can cut and add. The main thing I think to focus on when you're pulling handles is to be quick about it, because you don't want to exhaust your clay. You want it to be able to hold the shape, but also keep turning it, because if you only do it one way, then it'll be thinner on one side and thicker on the other, or at a slight angle. Let's see. Oh, it's not bad. Okay, so now we're gonna hang it to set up, like so. And once I've done this step, I always step back then and just take a look and make sure it's hanging nice and true. Okay, now we're on to the tricky part. Alrighty, so here we are with the teapot. First thing we're going to do is make the holes for the tea to actually come out of the teapot. I'm going to put those right around here. And then when we attach this spout, the important part is the end of the spout be up high enough so that the water is not going to come pouring out as you're filling the teapot. So let's just start with our holes. There we go. So that's generally enough. It's going to be a little rough on the other side because I've been going through this way, but I leave that until the teapot is bone dry, and then I go in with a little piece of really fine sandpaper and just tidy that up. Now I'm going to make a little score mark where the spout's going to go, but I'm usually right. I'm right. Okay. Now our spout. Now this part, I want to cut the spout so it's going to be on an angle, because I want it to be like this and the spout coming up this way. And then once I get to the halfway mark, I'm going to just move my cut up a little bit. Down to meet my cut there. See how this line is fairly flat there? I'm going to save us a fair bit of time later on. I'm going to take my fettling knife. I'm going to start the curve line here so it's going to sit nicer on the teapot, and I'm not going to have to do quite as much work joining it. I like to make my spouts look like they're flowing out of the teapot, so I don't get to hide behind like a spout line or anything, because it's all going to be one smooth line. So this stage really does help you a fair bit. Okay, so let's see how that went. So you see it's kind of curved off a bit there. Oh, okay, well that's not bad. I'm going to take this rib and just make it a little bit more smooth. I'm going to take the magic water or vinegar. Here's the important part. So we're going to cut this at an angle, so we want that spout to be up far enough that you can actually fill your teapot. Okay, so now going around, and this is of course why you see people just take it and accentuate that line, because like it's just so much easier. I'm going to take this rib and just start the process of making that become one. And teapots are a labor of love. So, you know, they just take as long as they take. So this is really the most time-consuming stage. Just put on some good music and get into it. That took a little bit of time, eh? But there you go. Like I say in my book, life is not a race, right? So when you're doing teapots, they really are a labor of love. So put the music on, get into it, and just accept it takes forever. Now, cutting the spout, I believe it's always about the angle. Could have got this a little bit wet ahead of time, but be that as it may. From what I understand about teapots and dripping, is the flow of the water, is the amount of times the teapot's been used. Actually, the more tannic acid that builds up, the less it drips, and you want a sharp edge. But we're kind of hooped in clay because if we make a really sharp edge, it's gonna chip. So what I like to do is I just cut it like so. And then, you know, when I'm glazing it, I just make sure there's not a ton of glaze there. Now, let's just smooth this out. So that's all tickety-boo. Now, we're gonna put the handle on. Once again, we're gonna make a score mark right across from the spout. Now we're gonna have to go over to the wedging table for this. Just easier for me to put the handle on there. Put your hands on the inside so support the shoulder of the teapot. Give it a good press. Keep my fingers there because that's kind of my guide for how big the handle should be. So I'm gonna nip her off. Put both fingers on the side here and just give it a little press. So before I move it back to my sculpture stand, I wanna make sure this isn't gonna fall off as I'm walking. Tidy up the bottom. Give it a little tension underneath. Now I'm gonna move it back to the sculpture table because I'm gonna guzzy it up a bit. Smoothing that in nicely. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. I usually take a look at it like this, just to make sure everything's fairly true. Now the last piece, the piece de resistance, as they say, is the lid. All right, piece de la resistance, as they say. Let's see if this lid fits nicely now. Oh my. Okay, so like nothing really makes me happier than that. So the only thing left to do, one last thing, is to make a little hole through there to let the steam escape and let your tea pour more smoothly. But you know how to do that, so I think we're done. So there you go. Now you know why we say teapots are a labor of love. I hope you've enjoyed watching all the steps involved and hope that you'll consider buying my book, My Life as a Potter, because all the proceeds from the book are being donated back to the Legacy Project. So you get to enjoy a good read and give back at the same time. It's a good thing. Happy tea drinking to you and pot on.